When we talk about the Holocaust, people will often say, why didn't more people save Jews? That's a really courageous statement when you take into account all the factors involved, especially in Nazi German-occupied Poland. People might rethink that statement if they understood the situations and risks and consequences involved, especially if they were truly honest with themselves. Everyone is a hero, right? During World War II in occupied Poland, both ethnic Poles and Jews were being persecuted. Just Poles to a lesser extent, but not much. Poles did face their share of difficulties with random roundups for deportations and even executions when Germans felt like killing a Pole. And they did every day, many times over. Life was not easy. You also have to remember that for the first part of the war, from 1939 to 1941, Eastern Poland was occupied by the Soviets, where the Jews actually had it relatively easier than the Poles. And in many instances, they even collaborated with the Poles' enemies, the Soviets. So during that time in the East, and yes, with the assistance of many Jews, the Poles had mass deportations of 1.7 million to Siberia, with 1/3 of those perishing as well as the murder of 22,000 officers in Katyn, all at the hands of the Soviets, who were our allies. This is something people often don't hear about. Shameful. All very one-sided as well. Considering what Poles were up against and the fact that many times they actually tried to warn the West about the decimation of the Jews, even after the betrayals, the Poles get a bad rap. And I will state this, it's wrong and historically false, because overall, the Poles did more than anyone else to assist the Jews, considering the situation they were in. It is estimated that over 1 million Poles aided Jews. It's the West and the Allies that did too little to help the Jews. Even many of the Jews in the West did little to help. They just could not believe the magnitude of this issue. Pole Jan Karski actually snuck into the Jewish ghettos, wrote a report, and went to the West and met with leaders and begged for something to be done for the Jews. He was ignored by even Roosevelt. Roosevelt preferred to talk about Polish horses, and the Jewish leaders, they thought he was exaggerating. Nothing was done. Another Polish hero, Witold Pilecki, who actually got himself rounded up on purpose to go to Auschwitz. Can you imagine the bravery? To find out what was going on, he then made a daring escape, wrote another report, and hoped that the Allies would drop weapons to organize an assault in the camp from the outside. People knew about this, and the Poles tried to tell the world over and over. Tens of thousands of individuals and families faced the ultimate sacrifice, as well as the Ulma family. Victoria and Joseph Ulma and their 6 children were murdered for hiding 8 Jews. She was pregnant. They were all murdered together. As mentioned, this is not an isolated incident. Even after this event, Poles continued to hide Jews in the town of Markowa where the crime occurred. It was also found out who tipped off the Germans. He was executed by the Polish Home Army. That was the punishment for any Pole who collaborated with the Germans. It is only in Poland, out of all Europe, where you not only face the death penalty for helping Jews, but also your whole family would be killed by the Germans. There's obviously a reason for that. They even wiped out whole towns for saving Jews. Another heroic Pole was priest Maximilian Kolbe, who died at Auschwitz. He at one time was sheltering over 2,000 Jews in his monastery, which was why he was there. When prisoners were sentenced to death for starvation and punishment for another inmate's escape at Auschwitz, Kolbe volunteered to go in the place of another man's lamentation for his wife and children. Survivors of the camp testified that the starving prisoners could be heard praying and singing hymns, led by the priest who volunteered for that agonizing death. Unlike what you may hear, the churches were involved in trying to save Jews when they could. The Catholic Church was brutally suppressed by the Nazi Germans, and convents and monasteries tried to assist. Nuns and priests were even executed. You may hear in the media or from others that Poles would collaborate in mass, but historically, that's pretty much nonsense, or propaganda just based on agendas. As mentioned, anyone who collaborated with the Germans would be executed by the Poles. They didn't play around. Poles, as you hear negatively today, are also considered nationalists, which I consider patriotic. But think about that. Would people who are such nationalistic actually collaborate? I don't think so. There are some people that say the Holocaust was planned to be in Poland because Poles were eager helpers. But so obviously that is disproven because simply it was convenient, because that was where the world's largest population of Jews lived. It made sense. Why transport them all around Europe to execute them when they are right there? And doesn't that tell you something? If Poland was so bad, why did all the Jews live there? It simply wasn't that bad. Poles even went so far as to set up a formal organization dedicated to saving Jews. It was called Zgoda. Many of its members were part of the Home Army, the AK, who today are labeled anti-Semitic. Funny, because there are actually Jews in it. Irina Sendler was among Zgoda's first recruits. She was an administrator in the Warsaw Welfare Department, and she had an invaluable network established with many medical and social workers. She succeeded in smuggling 2,500 Jewish children out of the Warsaw Ghetto and hid them with Polish and Austrian families. The main activities of Zgoda dealt with forging documents for Jewish refugees. On any given day, Zgoda produced an average of 100 forgeries. Because of Zgoda, 40 to 50,000 Jews were saved. One Polish man was caught tossing a sack of bread over the wall of the Warsaw Ghetto. He was instantly shot by the Nazis. Throughout the war, at least 20,000 members of Zgoda were captured and executed by the Germans. Thousands more were imprisoned, tortured, and sent to concentration camps. It is impossible to determine how many Poles helped Jews. When the Nazi Germans discovered the Jews hiding in Polish homes, they were shot along with the Poles. Often entire families, friends, and neighbors were murdered. No witnesses remained to tell the story. They write Hollywood movies about Germans like Schindler's List, who actually made money working off the Jews, but never made films about Poles. There was one case about Witold Pilecki, but they wanted to portray him as a Jewish man, and the family refused. Of course there was anti-Semitism, but isn't there anti-Semitism everywhere? Some Poles were scoundrels and killed Jews and worked with the Nazis. There was also anti-Polish sentiment, as I pointed out. Many Jews collaborated with the Soviets when they invaded, and many Jews also did not assimilate or even consider themselves Poles. It is estimated that 85% didn't even know Polish. That could definitely be an obstacle when trying to aid someone. When you hear about Polish anti-Semitism today, there's a lot to think about and take into account. Poles are now being blamed for the crimes of Germans. Germans don't mind. Some Jews also worked with the Nazis themselves, and Poles even had to be careful when sheltering Jews because there were times when Jews worked with the Gestapo in trying to root out Poles who were working against the Germans. This was a terrible time, and people would do anything to save their lives. Jews did not face the death penalty for collaborating with the Nazis as Poles did. Jews even ran the ghettos, had their own administration, and even their own police that were in charge of shipping other Jews off to camps. Even saying this, though, according to some Jews, could label me a Holocaust denier. That some Poles did not attempt to help the Jews had more to do with the terror of the Germans than indifference towards Jews. Often Poles were on starvation rations and barely making it. And could you imagine if some people came to you that you didn't even know and expected you to hide them, knowing that you and your whole family could be put to death? Really, think hard about this. We must all ask ourselves and search our souls deeply if we would have risked our lives and the lives of our own families to save people we most likely didn't even know. Would Jews have risked their lives to save Poles? Would you be a hero? As for gratitude, there is practically none. There's an organization that is supposed to honor the righteous who save lives, but it seems they go out of their way not to honor Poles, finding loopholes. Even the head, Itzhak Erod, was involved in hiding war crimes against Poles, Jewish Soviet partisans. There are approximately 7,000 trees planted for the righteous. But if they were factual and honorable, from Warsaw alone there would be tens of thousands of trees. Estimates of Poles who helped Jews is from 1 million to 3 million. Others, just recently came to light, was a Polish diplomat who with his assistance saved the lives of 8,000 Jews, but died in a homeless shelter. Imagine, not one came for him, and they actually had to uncover his incredible work of saving Jews. No Jews actually advocated for him, and the survivors are still reluctant to thank him. Another Jew, Jerzy Kaczynski, a writer who had his life spared with the help of Polish Christians during the Nazi German occupation, and in thanks wrote a disgusting, hateful, vile story In The Painted Bird, he writes about his years as a victim of horrific cruelty and barbarism, not committed by the Nazis, but by the peasant villagers, superstitious, ignorant, and brutal. Sadly, Poles who risked their lives and died are now repaid with such little that Poland itself honors those heroes instead of the Jews who should. As for conversations with Jews today about Poland, I don't even know. They call Poles anti-Semitic, but really, who here are the ones who hate? Where do we go from here? We should learn about the truth of heroism and martyrdom of the Poles and stop the deception that is now so prevalent. We should carry their message and let the world know of their utter selflessness. We are spitting on the dead, those dead who gave their lives for others, and they should not be forgotten or lied about. Stop it.